It is British weapons that are being used to kill our Palestinian brothers and sisters. British weapons from which not only the defense companies like BAE Systems, like Elbit Systems are profiting, but it is also our politicians who are profiting.
Shame! Shame!
Because these companies contribute more to our two establishment political parties, the Tories and Labour, who are indistinguishable now, than any other companies in the United Kingdom. And how do they respond? They respond by turning Parliament into a circus. Let's just remind ourselves what happened this week. The Scottish National Party brought forward a serious motion calling for a permanent and unqualified ceasefire. And what did Keir Starmer, my own constituency MP, do? He strong-armed the Speaker of Parliament by saying to him that if he didn't stop this motion, he would lose his job as Speaker when Starmer comes to power. So the Speaker of Parliament undermined the procedures of Parliament. He probably undermined the rules of Parliament by ensuring for the United States of America and with the President of Israel before it was put to Parliament. Who does Rishi Sunak represent? Who does Keir Starmer represent? Their constituents? The people of Britain? Or Israel and the United States of America? The problem today, not just in Britain, but across the so-called Western world, is that we have the best democracies money can buy, because they are bought and paid for.
As said, we went on a health workers delegation to Palestine, to the West Bank, back in May. Thank you all for coming, and I want to extend a special welcome to anybody here from the Jewish community. It's really, really important that you've come, and thank you so much, because it's not anti-Semitic to criticise Israel, and I know it's very difficult for you. It's not anti-Semitic to criticise Zionism, and just like we in 2003 when Tony Blair invaded Iraq with George Bush at his side, we said not in my name, and thank you very much to everybody, but especially the Jewish community who have come out and said that, who've marched with us, and you know, you just have to look at what's happening in the States, occupation, speak up, okay, you know, occupying the Statue of Liberty, occupying Grand Central Station, so thank you very much. And I think it's insulting to our Jewish brothers and sisters as well to equate Zionism with Judaism. Zionism is part of an imperialist project, and it's supported by Biden, Sunak and Starmer. Shame on them. They could stop it. They could stop it tomorrow if they wanted to, but they contort themselves on ridiculous sort of words around what, you know, a ceasefire, partial ceasefire. What do they call it? A sort of a conditional ceasefire. It's ridiculous. There needs to be a ceasefire now. What's happening in Gaza is unspeakable. 30,000 people killed, over half of those children. You know, I'm a GP. I've had a hip replacement. I was lucky enough. I had a clean theatre. I had an anaesthetic. I had pain relief afterwards. There were health professionals there who could look after me. You know, in Gaza there are pregnant women who are having caesareans with no anaesthetic. There are children who are having limbs amputated with no anaesthetic. There's no hygiene. There's no sanitation. They're starving and it's freezing cold. It's unspeakable what is happening over there. Hospitals are being bombed. There's no safe havens. And as the previous speaker said, the second Nakba is occurring before our very eyes. They're already building a fenced-in enclosure over the border in Egypt. And there's no doubt that what the Israelis want to do is to bomb Gaza to oblivion and then to occupy it and to settle it in the same way that they are trying to do in the West Bank. And we went to the West Bank, and it was such a privilege to go there. We were so welcome. We saw lots and lots of health facilities where people were working in the most really, really difficult circumstances to provide the best healthcare, like doctors and nurses and health workers over here, Palestinians want to provide the best healthcare for their populations. They were doing a fantastic job under occupation where there were soldiers of the IDF absolutely everywhere. You know, Palestine is under occupation and they have a right to resist. And it's ridiculous to say that the ceasefire has to mean that everybody has to lay down their arms. Palestinians have the right to resist. So our movement, and it's not anti-Semitic to say that either. And it's also not anti-Semitic to say that people should be able to live in one state together with equal rights in harmony, like we do everywhere else in the world. But there shouldn't be subjugation of one people by another. And what we saw in the West Bank was the difficulties that people every day have to go through. Ambulances being held up at checkpoints, people dying at checkpoints because they were having heart attacks but they weren't allowed to get through the checkpoints. Those sorts of things, just going about their ordinary lives, having to and never knowing, you know, families sending their children to school, not knowing if they'd come home, being tear gassed all the time. So we have to keep the pressure up because what we're doing is working. We've already got rid of one awful Home Secretary. We can get rid of the rest of this bloody awful government, and we can. But we need to stay on the street. We need to stay on the street. We're on the right side of history here. We are on the right side of it. We're calling this out for what it is. It's a second Nakba. It's got to stop. It's a genocide. It's got to stop. So we have to say ceasefire now. And finally, let's not let them stop our right to protest. They're going to attack our right to protest. They don't want to be shown up. We're showing them up. We're showing them up for what they are and for what they're doing. We've got to keep going. They're saying we can't protest outside MPs' homes. Okay, maybe fair enough. Outside their offices? Outside Parliament? They have no accountability at all. So no, we will not give up our right to protest. We will defend our right to protest.
And I reject any framing that casts Palestinians describing the cruel, dehumanizing, generations-long, multilateral oppressions that they have faced at the hands of Israel as anti-Semitic. This is not about Jewishness. That sleight of hand cleverly serves to divide our communities by diverting the conversation and the eyes of the public from where they belong right now. Our eyes should be fixed squarely on the people of Gaza, where entire bloodlines have been killed. Where entire bloodlines have been killed.
Shame!
Where hospitals, mosques, schools, universities, UN shelters, churches, food storage sites, and offices and homes like the one I lived and worked in 6 short years ago have been levelled in wholesale attacks that have been deliberately calculated to destroy Gaza's beauty and its civic life. Our eyes should be fixed on Rafah, where the people of Gaza have been made to abandon their homes, have had to run for their lives, only to find that predictably, because they predicted it, there is no shelter to be found there either, that there is no safety and there is no solace. That fusion of Zionism and Jewishness divides people like me from my Jewish siblings. It divides us from anti-Zionists of all stripes, from all of you. And most importantly, it serves to divide Palestinians from that groundswell of solidarity that they have inspired in us, the people of London, in cities and countries the world over. That very solidarity, which is a key tool to their liberation. It is a tool of division. Let's not let them divide us, and let's not get distracted. All eyes on Palestine. From the river to the sea! From the river to the sea!
Next speaker is Kareem from Gaza, Sunbirds.
Thank you. Hi everyone, it's so nice to see so many of you here. My name is Kareem Ali and I'm the co-founder of the Gaza Sunbirds. So, for those of you that don't know, the Gaza Sunbirds is a paracycling team based in the Gaza Strip. We have about 20 athletes and 5 members of staff who have been living there throughout this entire genocide. And I'm here to tell you a bit about the team and hopefully leave you with some hope. That's always my objective. So, the story of the team started with the story of Alaa al-Dali. Can you all say his name? Alaa al-Dali. Great. So Ala was the cycling champion of Palestine, right? Best cyclist out there for 6 years. He was never allowed to leave Palestine once to compete. And the reason that's the case is because, as y'all know, Israel has us under land, air, and sea siege, a blockade. In 2018, Ala was 21 years old. He'd never left a 7 kilometer by 42 kilometer strip of land, like open air prison, it's called. And he finally had the chance to go and represent Palestine in the Asian Games in Jakarta. Let's make some noise for him. It was huge for him. It was going to be his first opportunity to ever leave Gaza in his life. He was so beyond excited for it. And just 4 months before his first international competition, Ala decided to go to the Great March of Return. Who here knows about the Great March of Return? Let's make some noise. So, the Great March of Return was a peaceful demonstration organized by Gazans. They went out every single week for a whole year, from 2018 to 2019. And in the period of this year, 32,000 Palestinians were shot or injured by the Israeli occupation forces. 32,000. 155 of them ended up with amputations. And unfortunately on that day, Ala was hit in the leg by an illegal explosive Israeli bullet. It shattered on impact with his leg, and after that he was rejected medical leave from Gaza. 88% of those 32,000 people were rejected medical leave, and within 8 days he had to pick between his leg and his life. And he had to pick his life, and he called it actually the amputation of his dream. But luckily for us, luckily for the world, luckily for Palestine, luckily for all of humanity, Ala didn't give up. Within 2 months, Ala was back on his bike, and Ala became the first paracyclist in Palestinian history. Not only did he become the first paracyclist in Palestinian history, Ala decided that he wants to create a team of individuals who went through the same experiences as him to go and represent Palestine on the world stage. And with that, the Gaza Sunbirds was born. The sunbird is Palestine's national animal. It is a symbol against erasure. It knows no borders. It knows no limits. It does not need legs to fly. The sunbird is a symbol for the entire Palestinian cause. And then the genocide started, and I don't need to tell you about that. You've all been seeing it on the news. It's the most horrible thing in the world. More than 30,000 people have been killed. Around 100,000 people have been injured. Every single day, 10 children get amputated. Every single day, 10 children lose their legs without any anesthetic, just having to get it. It's horrible. And we know the pain, and it hurts us to see. But at the start of the genocide, our athletes decided they want to continue being a ray of hope for their communities. So what did they do? They started an aid operation on one leg and on their bikes. And to date, they've helped distribute $100,000 worth of food, sanitary products, and essentials. We are talking about the people that have lost most as a result of this occupation. Not only have they been hit, but they've had to live with the artifacts of that injury for the rest of their lives. Living in refugee camps, under the poverty line, with no way to transport around, with no future for jobs, no future, nothing. And despite all of this, despite everything that they've experienced, they still have hope. They still have hope. They still believe in peace. They still believe in a future where we're not going to be stuck in a prison yard cycling 38 kilometers from one wall to the next. And if they're not going to lose hope, in the light of this genocide, in the light of every single thing that they've been through, then we can't lose hope either. So thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for continuing to make noise. It means the world to us on the ground. The fight is still alive. The fight is still going. We are all on the front lines of this together. Your voice matters. Don't stop, never stop, not until we're free. Free, free! Free, free!
Thank you so much, Kareem. That was absolutely fantastic. Our last speaker before we start marching is Chris Anglem, who is from UCU, University and College Union. UCU, as many of you will know, has been fantastic in supporting the ceasefire cause and has been there from the start. So it's a great pleasure to have him here. Thank you, Chris.
Comrades and friends, welcome, and I just have to start with a salute to Palestine and victory to Palestine. Victory! 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 Right. I want to say just one. Last 2 days ago, we saw this chaos and farce in Parliament, where the Keir Starmer sabotaged a vote for a clear, simple vote for a ceasefire now in Palestine. And we know he's a Zionist, and he actually is carrying out his role to defend Israel, to defend capitalism, so the oil companies and bankers can continue to make their profits, and the arms companies. That's where he stands. So that's what happened in there. And so I just want to briefly, so there's no answer in Parliament. There's no answer for election. Who do you vote for when the election comes? Starmer? More of the same? No way. So the issue is, in the trade union movement, I'm a UCU chair at Cornell, the college in Tottenham, you may know it. We voted in my branch for a one-day national strike against this government, demonstration against this government, because they, against this government's support for Israel. And that was passed unanimously in the branch. I went to the head office, and that's the last we heard of it. That's because these trade union leaders, most of them, not all, most of them, although they did then participate in marches, and our leader Joe Grady got up and said, at the end of the march, he said, free Palestine. Well, we don't disagree with that. But who's she talking to? Sunak? Starmer? They're not going to free Palestine. Just before the other thing, in my union, there was a professor, David Miller, who was a professor in Bristol University. He was sacked for defending Palestine and condemning Zionism as racist and colonialist. And they sacked him. But he went to an industrial tribunal supported by the UCU union, and he won the case. He won the case, and the court was forced to concede and state that it's not anti-Semitic to say Israel is colonialist, Israel is a racist state. And so legally that establishes a precedent where we can campaign and condemn the Zionist state of Israel, and it explodes their whole witch hunt in the Labour Party and the unions and community about anti-Semitism. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. So just to conclude, the issue we think is that the trade union leaders, most of them, support increased military spending. What for? Imperialist wars. That's what they did at the TUC. These TUC leaders must be called to account. We think that the TUC must call a general strike to bring down this Tory government that supports Israel. We think that the trade union movement must call a national strike to march on Parliament and shut it down. It's corrupt. Like Cromwell did in the British Revolution back in the 1640s. Abolish Parliament, set up a workers' government elsewhere, and bring in socialism in Britain. Nationalise the economy, get rid of the billionaires, and give every political, military, financial aid to Palestinian liberation movement to overthrow the state of Israel. One state of Palestine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. I just have to remind everyone that Hamas is a designated terrorist organization in the UK, so no one gets arrested. We do not condone any of Hamas's activities, but free Palestine. So before we start marching, I want all of you to turn and face the direction where all the police officers are waiting for us. I just wanted to say one very important thing historically about this landmark. Mile End Park was actually the starting point of the peasants' revolution, the peasants' revolt, the Great Rising that occurred in 1381 in large parts of England. And that was as a result of socio-economic and political tensions that were generated by the Black Death at that time. So it has clear ramifications and clear, we are in a situation where we are suffering from clearly political divide, and unfortunately our leaders and the gap between our policymakers and the people on the ground is humongous. It's gaping and it's getting larger. So please use that as inspiration for our peaceful march. We will be heading down Commercial Street. We'll be going to Watney Market for a short stop for some more speeches, and then we will be finishing at Al-Tibi Ali Park, where we will have some final closing speeches as well. Thank you, everyone. From the river to the sea.
Could you come in the middle over here?
all for coming. So as it's that I'm an retired GP and I've been a socialist and almost lifelong member and socialist worker for all of my adult life, and I'm also an officer of Tower Hamlets Trades Council, representing the trade unionists of Tower Hamlets, who right from the start expressed solidarity with Palestine and Gaza and called for an immediate ceasefire. We pushed from the Trades Council for the Workplace Day of Solidarity Action with Palestine, called by Stop the War, and had action in many workplaces in Tower Hamlets, not least the Town Hall. But I'm also here as a doctor who went here with about 10 to 12 other health workers from Tower Hamlets. We went to the West Bank in May to look at the health facilities there, and more about that later. Now, the Speaker of the House of Commons said that he had to fix the vote in Parliament last week in order because he was afraid for the safety of MPs. Well, what about the safety of the Palestinians? What has been happening to health workers and hospitals in Gaza defies belief. From the first attack on Al-Shifa Hospital, supposedly looking for tunnels which did not exist, right to the latest attack last week on the Nasser Hospital in South Gaza. Israel has been targeting and destroying hospitals throughout Gaza. They cut electricity and water. 8 patients on ICU died for lack of oxygen, and only 11 out of the 36 hospitals in Gaza at the moment are functioning in any shape, and those poorly. This, in February, on the 9th of February, the Gaza Health Minister announced that the number of deaths of health workers has risen to 340, and that includes 200 hospitals. That is what genocide looks like. Destroy your houses, destroy your schools, destroy your hospitals so that a people cannot live. When we went to the West Bank in May, we thought we'd seen the inhumanity of the Zionist apartheid state in Palestine. We heard evidence of women needing caesarean sections being held at checkpoints till they either died or gave birth at checkpoints. We saw centres making artificial legs for children who had been targeted by Israeli snipers. We have since seen pictures of those health centres in the West Bank with their equipment smashed up and lying on the floor. I want to finish by looking at the situation in the UK. We saw the disgraceful manoeuvring in Parliament, with the Speaker refusing to take the SNP motion on an immediate ceasefire. And we then saw the Times newspaper blaming Ben Jamal of Palestine Solidarity for this atmosphere of so-called intimidation of MPs. The entire political establishment are trying to clamp down and restrict our protests against this genocide. So I say that we have to broaden the protests. We need to escalate the struggle to liberate Palestine. Friday, March the 8th, is the next Workplace Day of Action on International Women's Day in solidarity with Palestinian women. Let's make that as big as we can. We should follow the example of Jordan, where thousands came out of their mosques after Friday prayers to demonstrate. Could we not do that here? And then there's Saturday the 9th of March, which is our next national march. We cannot let our protests be stifled by the establishment. We cannot stand by while Gaza and the West Bank is dying. We can win from the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Candice. That was fantastic. Our next speaker is a very special guest. We have John Rees from Stop the War Coalition. He is a British political activist, academic, journalist and writer who's a national officer of Stop the War and a founding member of Counterfire. He's also currently a research fellow at Goldsmiths, University of London, where they are holding an occupation as we speak for the past 4 days. Give it a big heads up for John Rees.
You know, I look at the House of Commons this week,
and I look at the total debacle amongst the politicians, and I think to myself, surely it must be true that if we went down any high street in Britain, and if we picked out 635 ordinary working people as they passed us in the street and sent them to Parliament, they would do better than this shambles. They certainly would know a genocide when they saw it. They certainly would not stand back and watch the mass slaughter of innocents and applaud the people conducting the slaughter. No ordinary person in that society would do that. And I'll tell you how we know that, because in the opinion polls, 66%, 2/3, 2 out of every 3 people that you see in the street support a ceasefire, and only 13% of people think that the Israelis should continue with the military action. And that number supporting a ceasefire has increased by 11% since we first started marching. And that's why they want to ban the protesters. That's why, disgracefully, the Speaker in the House of Commons blamed the protesters for his failure. Lindsay Hoyle, that was yours to own. You prevented the House of Commons voting on the SNP ceasefire motion. If people dislike MPs, it's because they do things like that. That's why they are disliked. That's why they need lobbying. That's why we're right to protest outside the House of Commons, which is, by the way, one of the oldest political freedoms in this country, established by the Levellers in the 17th century, defended by the Wilkes and Liberty crowds of the 18th century, fought for by the Chartists in the 19th century, practiced by the suffragettes in the 20th century. We are inheritors of a long and great tradition of freedom of speech and freedom of assembly, and no bunch of MPs is going to stop us exercising that historic right. And we must now build on that support among ordinary people. You see, I'm not a Palestinian. I'm not a Jew. I'm not here because I have a specific interest in this conflict. I'm here, like the vast majority of ordinary people in this country who support the Palestinians. I'm here because when I see a jackboot on the neck of somebody lying on the ground, I know whose side I'm on. When I see a small boy facing a Merkava tank, I know whose side I'm on. When I hear about somebody driven from their home, shot in the leg, amputated once, without anaesthetic, and then without medicine have to be amputated again, I knock on the side of the person that did that to them. I'm on their side. And that's what ordinary people in this country think. They know that when Boris Johnson said, "Let the bodies pile high," he wasn't talking about Palestinians. He was talking about us during the COVID crisis. And we are all Palestinians, not by birth, but because we face the same enemies. They would have casually let us die here as they let Gazans die there. We are all Palestinians because we face the same enemy, because we're united in the same struggle. Keep up the fight. Solidarity.
Thank you, John. Our next speaker is Emily Stevenson. Emily is a dear friend of mine. She is a British Bosnian Jew who works for the organisation Hamlets, British Jews Against the Occupation of Palestine. She is coming here to give, I'm sure, a fantastic speech. Thank you so much, Emily.
Shalom Aleichem, everyone. I know I started this speech off very cheerily, very happily, but the truth is, today and for the last 140 days, I have been furious. I have been furious. We saw this week, we saw on Wednesday, the shameful behavior of our politicians. We saw them in the halls of power choosing to prioritize pathetic point scoring and pathetic political posturing over calling for the end to the mass slaughter, to the senseless murder we have been witnessing for months. We saw them prioritize their careers over Palestinian lives. And I see them as a Jew stoking the fires of Islamophobia. And I see them as a Jew weaponizing anti-Semitism in order to curb our rights to protest. And I want to make it clear, and I have said this before, our government does not care about Jews. They do not care about me. They do not care about Max or Andrew, who spoke earlier. They do not care about Nahamod. They do not care about the Black Jewish Alliance. They do not care about Jewish Voice for Peace. They do not care about If Not Now. They do not care about Jüdische Stimme. They do not care about all of these Jewish organizations calling for a ceasefire. They do not care about us. They only care about us when they can use us as a cudgel to beat people who are standing in solidarity with Palestinians, and that includes fellow Jews. And I am speaking as someone who has witnessed the after effects of a genocide, not just in the Jewish community, because I'm not lucky enough to be descended from Ashkenazim, but as a Bosnian. I was born 2 months after the destruction of my mother's family. I was born 2 months before the signing of the Dayton agreements. When you see the phrase wounded child, no surviving family, I know wounded adults with no surviving families. I know people who were shot in Sarajevo. I know people who survived Gorazde, the closest thing we have to Rafah right now. I know people who lost their entire families on one day in Srebrenica, and I have seen the after effects. I know what it does. I have seen the future of Palestine, and it is Bosnia. I have seen what genocide does to a people. I know how painful it is to be born into a world where you don't have the privilege of knowing your family members because they were robbed from you before you were born. I know what it's like to live with that pain, and it is unbearable. It is heartbreaking, and it is horrifying. And it is all the more horrifying to see our government, my government, weaponize, instrumentalize, utilize the suffering of my Jewish ancestors who suffered for thousands of years in order to aid and abet genocide, to aid and abet slaughter, to aid and abet ethnic cleansing, and I will not stand for it. I will not have it be done in my name. They can do it in theirs. And when I see all of these people telling Namod, telling the International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, telling groups like Tzedek in France, and telling South African Jews for a free Palestine, and anti-Zionist Jewish groups in Brazil, and Argentina, and America, that we are capos, that we are traitors, that we are Nazi functionaries, I say to them, when they tell me my ancestors would be ashamed of me, I tell them, whenever I get on a stage, it is with the voice of my ancestors that I am speaking. I am speaking with the voice of my ancestors who were driven from Spain in 1492. I am speaking with the voice of my ancestors who came to Britain as refugees in 1750. I am speaking with the voice of Ashkenazim whose ancestors came to Britain as the huddled masses yearning to be free that you see written about on the Statue of Liberty, as people who are escaping pogroms, as people who are escaping genocide, as people who are escaping violence. I have never been more proud to be a Jew and stand here today. I have never been more proud of my comrades, Jewish and non-Jewish. And I have never been so certain that in the face of this violence, in the face of this slaughter, in the face of this genocide, that I will live to see a free Palestine.
From the river to the sea. This is such a beautiful sight to see. Long live East London, long live Palestine. I'm here to say a few very brief words on behalf of the Just Reporting Network. We're a group of journalists gathered in the wake of October the 7th to stand in solidarity with our colleagues who are being systematically and deliberately targeted, killed, assassinated by the Israeli state on a daily basis. Just hours ago, late last night, 2 more names added to the ever-growing list. Mohammed al-Yaghi and Mus'ab Abu Zayd, killed under Israeli bombardment in their homes along with their wives and small children. The number of journalists killed so far is 132. The Committee for the Protection of Journalists call that the highest number of journalist fatalities of any conflict since they began keeping records. That number represents 1 in 10 of every journalist in Gaza. 10% of that small group of people who are the only reason we know anything of the horrors going on in Gaza. Because as we all know, Israel continues to deny entry to foreign journalists into Gaza, except a select few who are embedded with the Israeli military and who must submit their work for review to the Israeli Ministry of Information. Meanwhile, instead of expressing support and outrage, our news establishment is busy providing cover and PR for the genocidal violence that is going on. And I don't need to tell any of you here the many ways in which they're doing that, but one thing I would like to tell you is this. As a journalist, as part of my job, I am in contact with journalists in Gaza every single day, and so are many of my colleagues. And we are all in agreement on this, that the conviction and the courage shown by journalists on a daily basis in Gaza defies belief. We're talking about journalists who bury parents, siblings, children, and return to work the very same day. Journalists I know, especially in the north of Gaza right now, who haven't eaten a square meal in days and somehow find the energy to stand in front of a camera on live TV and report on a genocide they are subject to. Journalists who've sent me recordings of calls they've received from Israeli military intelligence threatening them that if they don't stop their work, they'll be killed. So it's up to us as journalists, as media workers, and as conscientious media consumers that we all are here, to amplify their voices, to put the pressure on our governments, to keep the pressure on our media establishments, and finally, most importantly, to anyone here who works in journalism, media, all the publishing industries, especially if you work in a kind of environment where you feel you can't speak up on Palestine, on Gaza, you can't call out the bias that you see around you. There's a people around you who are like-minded. We're here to help you. Look up the Just Reporting Network online or approach us in person. We have legal resources, we have professional resources. We're here to help you. We're here to provide confidential support. Long live Palestine. Free Gaza.